What's up everybody, Straw Hats Are Cool here, and we are back again with another video. Today we are going to be hopping on the sim and playing some games with one of my personal favorite leaders, Red Purple Luffy, in the OP07 format on the ranked Discord. Before we get into today's video, as always, I do just want to thank everyone who has been supporting me and the channel as of recently. We are just a hair away from hitting 2,600 subscribers already. I feels like we just hit 2,500 this week, so I really do appreciate everyone's support with that. We just recently uploaded a market watch, so if you missed that, be sure to check that out. Additionally, we have a Discord, link for that will be down in the video description. And lastly, we have a TCG Player affiliate link, so if you plan on buying any cards off of TCG Player, consider using my affiliate link, as a small percentage of your purchase will go towards supporting me and the channel. But with all that out of the way, let's go ahead and dive right into the deck breakdown. So as I'm sure a lot of you know, Red Purple Luffy is one of, if not my favorite leader in the game. I've had a ton of fun playing this leader and recently got top 32 at a 1,000 player tournament with Red Purple Luffy in the one of the last OP06 tournaments. I believe it was the last pre-ban, pre-Sokka ban OP06 tournament. So that was very exciting. And if you missed my deck profile for that, I posted it just a couple weeks ago on the channel, so you can go back and check that out. I'll try to remember to link it down in the description, but I'm notoriously bad at remembering to do those things. But anyways, Red Purple Luffy is a deck that I feel like has more potential than a lot of people give it credit for in the OP07 format, but it could just be that I'm biased and I like this leader a lot. So for those of you who aren't familiar with Red Purple Luffy, he is a 6,000 power base leader, very similar to Newgate, dual colors, red and purple. But as a kind of downside of being a 6,000 power leader, similar to Newgate, who has to take a life every turn, we only have 3 starting life, which can be fairly detrimental, but the additional 1,000 power does help us out quite a bit. The leader effect on Red Purple Luffy states that activate main once per turn if your field has 0 Dawn or 8 or more Dawn. You may add 1 Dawn from your Dawn deck as active. So essentially our 8 Dawn turn becomes our 9 Dawn turn, and our 10 Dawn or our 9 Dawn turn can become our 10 Dawn turn. And then it's really nice because later in the game our Dawn minus effects we kind of get to do for free, so long as we have 8 or more Dawn after using those effects, because we can get at least one of those Dawn back with our ability. And then we are playing the 10 drop Secret Rare Luffy, so if we use that, we can also use the leader effect on 0 to help us get some Dawn back for our extra turn after playing that. So the real draw, I think, to playing Red Purple Luffy right now is that the format is still very centered around decks like Red Purple Law, and Lucci kind of replaced Gecko Moria. But against decks that generally spawn out a lot of those 5,000 power characters, the additional 1,000 power on Luffy really is quite powerful, because it means that all those base 5,000 power bodies that into most leaders would be natural attackers, they're going to have to commit an extra Dawn into their attack in order for it to land against the Red Purple Luffy. Against a deck like Red Purple Law in particular, this can be exceptionally annoying, as in order to use their leader effect, they're typically doing a lot of Dawn minusing, which means they're not always going to have a lot of Dawn to play with, so buffing up their attacks can be pretty annoying for them, because it means they're probably not going to be able to play out an additional character, which is generally what they would be trying to do. But I still think even into other decks like Lucci, they also spawn out a lot of smaller bodies at the start, and then try and chain Gecko Morias. Against, like I said, those lot of smaller bodies, they're generally not able to develop their board early because they're trying to attack into us, or they're not attacking into us because they're trying to develop board. Either way is kind of a win for us. Bonnie, we've just got big guys to compete with them, but I do think Bonnie is one of our harder matchups if the Bonnie player is playing correctly. But overall, I just feel like this deck has a pretty even matchup spread. As of this recording, I've already played 7 games, and I will be sharing some of those with you here in a little bit. And I did win all 7 of those games. This was on the ranked OP Bounty Discord or server, the application you can open through the sim. So yeah, the deck's been doing very well. So let's go ahead and talk about the card by card. For the most part, the deck is fairly similar to how I played it in OP06 with a couple new additions and changes. So we are, of course, running 4 copies of Nami. She is our searcher for the deck. She can search out all the 2Ks we're running in this build. She searches out the 10-drop Luffy. She can search out Joro Joro, our Radical Beams, as well as our Diamble Jambe, which can be an important card for closing out the game. So just a nice consistency piece. Of course, we're running Nami, given that we are generally running a pretty heavy Straw Hat focused build. The only kind of downside here to running Nami is that outside of Luffy, none of our top end is Straw Hat, so there are times where you're going to end up bottom decking some of your top end that you may want in hand, which can be a little bit unfortunate, but you still, I think it's worth running the Nami as just an added piece for consistency. We're running 3 copies of Edward Newgate. I believe in my OP06 deck profile, I was also running 3. I could definitely understand you want to run 4. I'm only running 3 because we are running a lot of different top-end cards that are good for different matchups and different situations. So I kind of just did like a 3 split on all of them so that I had a good chance of seeing them at any given moment. But Newgate's really good. As we mentioned, he's exceptionally good in like Red Purple Law, Gecko Moria, if you happen to come across that. Any of those decks that spam out a lot of 5-cost bodies, this card is exceptionally good into, because he's going to bump our leader up to 8k, which means now they not only need to put 1 Dawn on to get their attacks, and they're going to need to put at least 3 on a 5,000 power character or leader in order for the attack to land on us. So oftentimes we play this and it just kind of buys us a turn because they're probably not going to be getting too many attacks into us. Next up, we've got 2 copies of the Nico Robin, and this card is very situational, but I do think you still have to run it in the current OP07 format for a couple reasons. And a lot of matchups, this card is not going to do anything aside from be a 1k counter, but one of the big reasons we're running this card is that it can KO Bonclay on play. And Bonclay is one of the most problematic cards, I think, for this deck, and one that sees a lot of play in Red Purple Law, because Bonclay is a 4-cost character that can just copy the power of one of our characters, and since we're playing a lot of 10 to 12,000 power characters, he can be a 4-cost body that's swinging 10 to 12 into us for free, and that's not what we want. We are a 6,000 power leader base, but a 10 to 12k attack is still gonna require that we drop a lot of cards to get out of the attack. So Robin being a nice little answer to that is beneficial. Also good way to out a Rebecca, which can easily stop one of our big attacks, as well as the 2-drop Rosinante in green. And that can be a pretty annoying card, as it can not only block, but if we try and play something like the Shanks, which is the next card we're going to talk about, it can stop their character from being KO'd. So Shanks is the next top end piece we're running. We're running in 3 copies of Shanks as well. So like I said, we're kind of doing 3 on all of our big cards except for the Luffy, since he's searchable. This is a 10-drop 12k, and on play you may KO up to one of your opponent's characters with 10,000 power or less. This card is exceptionally important against Bonnie as well as Enel. Bonnie and Enel both play a lot of top-end cards, but they're all 10,000 power or less. You've got the new Ace in yellow, which has 10,000 power. Doflamingo in green, which is 10,000 power. Their 8-cost Kid, their Hody Jones. Just all of their top-end characters are generally 10,000 power or less. And this card can just remove it and then you're establishing a 12k body. And in those matchups, they're generally not able to deal with it very easily. Yellow does have Raigo as an option to get rid of this, but generally you're going to try and leave your opponent at 2 to 3 life if you're playing against NL, at least until you start establishing some board. So that way, if they do opt to play Raigo, it's still going to be a little bit detrimental for them. A new card we are playing from OP07 is this Baccarat. It's a 3-cost, 4,000 power character with 1k counter. It has blocker, and an opponent's attack once per turn. You may trash 1 card from your hand, and your leader or one of your characters gains plus 2,000 power for this battle. So this is not only a blocker, so it can stop an attack all on its own there, but it also allows you to turn a dead card into a 2k counter once per turn, so long as it sticks. And being a 3-cost 4,000 power is a pretty good stat line for a blocker as well, primarily because it means that a deck like Red Purple Law cannot just remove it for free with their leader ability, but they will rather have to spend at least one form of power reduction into bringing the power of this card down so that it is within range of their leader effect. So really nice card. I like the Baccarat quite a lot, and I think it's a good addition to the deck. Next up, another new card from OP07. This is the new SR for Red, Monkey D. Dragon. 8-cost, 9,000 power character with Rush, and on play you can give your leader or up to one of your characters 2 rested Dawn cards. So this is just a Rush piece that we can play on 8. In our 8 Dawn turn, as we mentioned, is essentially our 9 Dawn turn. So what's really cool with the Dragon is even if we have nothing else on board, we can, on our 8 Dawn turn, becomes our 9 Dawn turn, we can slap down Dragon, give 2 Dawn to our leader, and then maybe an additional Dawn to our leader, and now we're swinging 9 with our leader and 9 with the Monkey D. Dragon, which puts a lot of pressure on our opponent, especially because a lot of times we're doing this on turn 4, if not maybe turn 3 if we see a lot of ramp early. So very powerful addition to the deck, just lets us be more aggressive, which I think in this format is what we're trying to do. Generally, we're not trying to play a long game, being that we're only a 3-life leader, but because we're 6,000 power, we can put a lot of early pressure on our opponent, and now we've got the additional rush, which has been quite beneficial. We are, of course, still running 4 copies of the Bond Clay from EB01, one of the best new ramp pieces the deck has access to from EB01, and one of the reasons I enjoyed playing this deck a lot in the OP06 format post EB01, being a 4-cost 1,000 power character with 1k counter, and then having the on play to immediately get us an active Dawn means that even if we play this on 4 Dawn going on our 2nd turn, we've got an additional Dawn we can put on our leader to make it a 7k swing, so our opponent's probably not going to be countering out of that. And like I keep saying, kind of the whole idea of this deck is we're just going to put as much pressure on our opponent as we can early, and then they're going to kind of be forced to start removing our big bodies, and we're going to try and play a Luffy to close out the game. This card's also really threatening, as if our opponent doesn't deal with it, it can copy one of their character's attacks. And like we said, for ourselves, this is very scary for us to see, but it's also very scary for our opponent, especially if they play something out like a Gecko Moria and they aren't able to get rid of this. He's going to be a 9k swinger on the following turn. Our other ramp tool we've got here is Zoro Juro. This is a card we want to see if we're going first. It's a 3-drop 4,000 power character with 1k counter and a when attacking effect that states if you have 3 or less life, add up to 1 Dawn from your Dawn deck is active. Now, because we are a 3-life leader, this effect will always be active if we're able to get an attack off with it. And what's really cool about this is that a lot of times you'll be putting a Dawn on him, swing 5 and getting an active Dawn, and it's essentially you're swinging 5 for free because you're getting the Dawn you put on him back as active. But sometimes you don't even have to get an attack off on your opponent. You can just swing 4 into their leader. They're not going to give you a card for it, of course, because there are no 4,000 power leaders in the game, with the exception of the Red Purple Kid when he's got more than 3 life. But if you play this out going first, for example, you're going to be on 3 Dawn when you play this, so you'll be going to 5, you can attack. You'll go up to 6 Dawn, so it can allow you for some additional plays. If you're going second, It makes your 6 Dawn turn, 7 Dawn turn, kind of like Bond Clay, which means you could play something out like your Eustace Captain Kidd. It's just a very flexible ramp card. And now that Sakazuki's gone, it's a lot harder to remove a 3-drop on curve. So for that reason, I think this deck just got a little bit better. That's why you're seeing decks like Red Purple Law playing Zorojura as well, because it's a lot harder to remove it on curve if you play this out turn 2 going first. We're running 4 copies of the Frenosuke. This is just one of the better 2K options for the deck. It's a 5 cost, 4,000 power, 2K counter, so it does have a poor stat line, but it is Straw Hat Crew typed, and it has an effect where if we have 8 or more Dawn, it gains Rush for 1 Dawn. So kind of like you have to invest at least 6 Dawn into it to get the attack off. But there actually was a game where I did play this, and it did help me close out, or not close out the game, but put me in a position where I was able to close out the game in the following turn. Now, I've already talked about Luffy a couple times, but this is one of our other top end cards. We're only running 2 copies of this one because he is searchable off of Nami. This is kind of our game closer in a lot of matchups, really good into the blue decks that I found, as well as Rob Lucci. It's a 10 cost, 12,000 power character, on play, Dawn -10, place all your characters other than this character at the bottom of your deck in any order. Then after this turn, you may take another turn. So we get another turn. And what's really cool is with our leader effect, we can, first we're going to attack with any characters we have on the board. We're going to drop Luffy. We're going to go down to 0 Dawn. Use our leader effect, assuming we haven't used it already. You want to play Luffy when you untap on 10. You don't want to be on 9, play this, because then you're not going to be able to get as much Dawn back on your extra turn. So you want to play this on 10, go down to 0, use your leader effect to get 1 Dawn active. Then you're going to tap that Dawn with the additional effect of Luffy, which states activate main once per turn. You can pay 1 Dawn and add 1 Dawn from your Dawn deck as active. Now we're at 2 Dawn, 1 active. We're going to put it on leader, swing 7, take an extra turn, go to 4 Dawn, use the effect, pay 1, get 1 active. So we're on 5 with 4 active. We can put 3 to 4 Dawn on our leader, swing 9 or 10. And then we can swing with the Luffy. And this just gets even better if we have Diablo Jame in hand and they're trying to hide behind a blocker. So, really powerful card for closing out the game. Sorry for the brief cut there. I've been doing a lot of talking, just got through recording a market watch as well. And my throat, I guess I needed some water. Ended up choking a little bit there. But yeah, Luffy, great top end card for closing out the game, especially when our opponent's down to 1 or even 2 life. They've not got a lot of cards in hand. The game's often just going to end as soon as this card hits the field. The last new card from OP07 that we're running is Sanji. This is a new 2K counter, and he replaces the Usohachi and Jinbei that I was playing in my previous build for OP06. This is just the best, I think, 2K counter option for the deck now. 6 cost, 6,000 power, 2K counter. It's a blocker, and if you have 2 fewer Dawn or more than your opponent, so for example, if your opponent is on 8 Dawn and you are on 6 Dawn, this effect will become active, where the cost of this card becomes 3 less. So essentially, if you have 2 less Dawn than your opponent at the time that this card is in your hand, you can play it for 3 instead of 6. So one of the really cool plays that we can do with this card is, let's say we play the 10 drop Luffy and we go down to 0, we use our effect, go to 1, use the Luffy's effect, go to 2, untap, we're on 4. We can swing for 7 with our leader, swing for 12 with the 10 drop Luffy, and then because we're almost certainly going to be at less Dawn than our opponent, unless we're playing against maybe something like Red Purple Law, now we can play Sanji and have a 6k blocker for 3 Dawn. So that's just one example of where it could come up. But yeah, this card is exceptionally powerful, and even just having a 6,000 power blocker, even if you don't get the extra reduction. You'll see, probably not today, but tomorrow in the second video where we do more games with the deck. I've got one game against an L. It was a really long game, but just being able to play this card out as a blocker meant that they weren't able to go for game in scenarios where they wanted to, because we had an extra blocker and we had Shanks. We were able to keep clearing their big bodies. All they ever had to attack with was usually their leader and maybe one other character. And just playing this out helped us prolong the game long enough that we were able to close it out in the end. It was a game I did not think I was going to win, but with the help of this card, we were able to close it out. Another 6,000 power blocker we've got is Queen. Easily one of the best cards in the deck. 5 cost, 6,000 power, 1k counter. It's a blocker, and on play, Dawn -1, draw 2, trash 1. So if we play this on 9 or 10, we can just get back the Dawn with our leader, so kind of becomes like a free effect. In fact, it kind of almost reduces the cost of Queen in a way if you play this on 10, because you play it for 5, you go -1, you get 1 back, you're on 6 Dawn. So it's kind of like you got to play Queen for 4 Dawn, which is pretty cool. And then it's just a 6,000 power blocker. This card is also very important in the NL matchup, especially now that Reject has been banned from the game. They don't have that as an option for removing it. So really all they've got is they've got the Onami trigger, and then they've got Raigo, because Gedatsu isn't even getting this because we're a 3 life leader. We're never gonna, I mean, unless they heal us several times with Gedatsu, they're not killing Queen with a Gedatsu. Next up, we've got 3 copies of Kid. This is the last top end card we're running. So like I said, there's a 3 split on Newgate, Shanks, Dragon, and now Kid. Kid is a 7 cost, 8,000 power character. On play and when attacking, Dawn -1. Up to one of your leaders gains plus 1,000 power until the start of your next turn. So kind of similar to Newgate and giving us a buff to our leader, only if this guy sticks on the board, we keep doing this effect every single turn. And because it's Dawn -1 effect, with our leader effect later in the game, it can even allow us to set up some pretty nasty plays that you wouldn't be able to do by essentially giving you an 11 Dawn turn. One example that I was talking with someone in the from my locals in the Discord that we have about Red Purple Luffy, because he's wanting to play this deck. One of the cool plays that he mentioned, and this is just one of many because I've done things like this before, but he mentioned that against green specifically, on 10, if you have a Kid on the board, you can play Nico Robin for 1 to kill something like a Rosinante, which like we said, can be a pretty annoying card. Attack with Kid for 8. Return the Dawn we used to play the Robin. Then get it back with the Luffy. So we're back on 10. And now we can play Shanks to remove one of their big characters. So maybe they played 8 cost Kid out and we're trying to protect it with the Rosinante. Well, we can swing, or we can play this, kill the Rosinante, swing 8 into the Kid. They're probably going to give us a card. And now we can use our leader effect, get 1 back, play Shanks for 10, and just kill the Kid. That's just one combo. Another one is with Diablo Jambe. You can play this preemptively, use Kid, swing for 8k, get the Dawn back you spent on Diablo Jambe, and now you get to swing for 16 with your leader to close out the game. And that's assuming you have nothing else on board. So those are just a couple cute little combos you can do, but just being able to have an 11 Dawn turn makes for some pretty nasty plays. Next up, we're running 4 copies of Radical Beam. This is a 1 cost counter event. Your leader or up to one of your characters gains plus 2,000 power during this battle. Then if you have 2 or less life, you gain an additional 2,000 power during this battle. In addition to that, it has Trigger. Your leader or up to one of your characters gains plus 1,000 power during this battle. Now, Trigger doesn't come up too often, but against a deck like Red Purple Law, it could pop up at the end and end up saving you the game, because maybe now you're a 7,000 power leader as opposed to a 6,000 power leader, which means now all those 5,000 power bodies need to commit not 1, but 2 Dawn in order to get an attack into your leader. But what's really nice about this card is that because we're a 3 life leader, we only have to take 1 hit before the full value of this card is active, since we get the full effect once we're at 2 life. We've already mentioned Diablo Jambe. This is one of our cards we use to close out the game. Your opponent's generally probably going to try and play around this card and not go down to 0 if they can help it. But our goal is to try and put them in a position where they have to go down to 0. We can untap and play Diablo Jambe to go for game. Even if we don't have something big like the Luffy on the board, our leader's a Straw Hat, so we can just put this on him. Because we're base 5,000 or base 6,000 power, we can put the remaining 9 down on our leader, swing 15 unblockable, and a lot of times that's just good enough to close out the game. Lastly, we've got Gum Gum Jet Gatling. We're down to 2 copies of this card. In my previous build, I was running 3. But I think with the help of Baccarat, you can afford to drop this card down a little bit, even though we might be running more bricks than we were before. But this is our 0 cost event of choice. It's better than the red one. You trash a card from your hand and you gain plus 3,000 power for one of your leaders or characters for the battle. So just a nice little tool to help us use some of our dead cards in situations where they're not necessary, so we can get some additional counter value out of them. It also has a trigger where we can add 1 Dawn from our Dawn deck and set it as active. If we trigger this on our first life, sometimes it can allow us to make some bigger plays earlier than we would have otherwise been able to, but it's not going to come up too often, and it's also Straw Hat Crew searchable, so just a nice inclusion for the deck. So that is my list. Like I said, I've played 7 games already, and we are currently undefeated with the deck. I'm not saying this build's perfect. There are, of course, other things I think are worth considering, which is what we're briefly going to talk about now. I've probably got too many cards on this list, but I love this deck so much that I've really been thinking about the deck and testing different things with it. And these are just some of the options I think are worth considering. There are, of course, going to be other things you could play. There is a whole plethora of cards now with 7 main sets and 1 mini set in the game now, in addition to all the starter decks. So there's lots of red and purple cards to choose from, but these are some of the ones that I think are worth considering more than others. This is a card that during my last deck profile and gameplay video for Red Purple Luffy, one of my viewers had mentioned potentially running over the 5-cost Luffy I was running at the time. And speaking of that 5-cost Luffy, we should probably add that to the list of potentially playable cards. But they had mentioned why not run this over the 5-cost Luffy, since this is something you can actually play after you use your 10-drop Luffy, since you'll have 4 Dawns, so you could do like a 6, 7, 12 attack. And while that's true, this card is not searchable, and generally, unless your opponent has 2 life left and you're in a scenario where you need to go for game and they have like no cards in hand, that kind of line of play is never really going to become relevant, I don't think. Yes, you're getting an extra body on the board, but it doesn't really matter. It's probably just better to go 10-12 or 9-13 depending on the circumstances. So for that reason, I'm not playing the kid. It's not searchable. It's another dead card, but it is something you can consider playing, especially if you're trying to build your deck even more aggressively. You've got this, you've got the dragon. You're going to be putting your opponent down to 2 life pretty quickly, especially if they're a 4-life leader. And this could be just some additional pressure to help you really put your opponent on the clock. Next up is this Tony Chopper. I was messing around with this in some earlier builds, and it's pretty nice. It's just another blocker that's Straw Hat searchable. It's got counter. It's also 4,000 power, which means Law can't just out it for free. And then the additional effect to Dawn 2 when attacking, give an opponent minus 3,000 power, can be relevant. Sometimes it allows you to get an attack off with the chopper, reduce the power of something, maybe on a blocker, and then now your Newgate, if that's stuck on the board, is able to KO a 6,000 power character. But the effect's just a little bit too situational, and while having a searchable blocker is good, I think just having the Sanji now is better. This may have been a more worthwhile option in the EB01 format, but with Sanji now in the game, I just don't think you need to play the chopper. But if you want another Straw Hat searchable blocker, I think this is probably the best option. Now, here are 3 other 2K counter options you could consider running. I'm going to talk about Sanji first. The only reason I think I would consider running this one is if you don't have 4 copies of the new Sanji from OP07. The card is still a little bit more expensive. If I recall, it's around $6 or $7 right now, and maybe you haven't been able to get your hands on product yet. I think Sanji is a cheaper option that is worth considering. You're probably not going to use the effect too often because you are only a 3 life leader, so using this can be pretty costly. But maybe you play this out in a situation where and it'll allow you to go for your game when you wouldn't otherwise be able to. But really the only thing here is it's another Straw Hat searchable 2K. Otama is another kind of worthwhile option, kind of similar to how we talked with Chopper. Can allow your Newgate to KO a more powerful character up to 5,000 power now. So maybe you're playing against Red Purple Law and they're hiding behind a blocker like Law. You can play Otama, then put 2 Dawn on Newgate. You're killing the Law, and if they don't have any other blockers, you're probably just going to close out the game if you throw everything on the Newgate. I think Otama is a good 2K counter option, but the reason I am not running it is because it's not a Straw Hat type, which means it's not searchable. Same thing with the Makino. This could be another good option for a 2K if you're really trying to be more aggressive. Maybe there is a build where you're playing Kid Killer, the Makinos, and now even your Namis can become surprise attackers towards the end of the game, which just really allows you to put even more pressure on your opponent. Forgot to add Luffy to the list, but Luffy, of course, still a very good option for the deck. Being able to bypass blockers and having Rush, just again, we're putting pressure on our opponent. That's what we're trying to do. Another good option for that. I've seen a couple lists running the Miss All Sunday. I have not personally tried this out, but it is a way to ramp, and it does also replace itself, which can be pretty powerful. It's not, while it is Robin, this is Miss All Sunday, so this was before she was part of the Straw Hat crew. So this is not a Straw Hat type character, which does mean it is not searchable, unfortunately. If it was, I'd be a lot more inclined to trying this out, but as it stands, I don't love this card. It's another dead card, and we have other ramp options through Zoro Joro and Bon Clay that do have counter. Reiju's another card I've seen talked about a little bit for Red Purple Luffy. I'm not the biggest fan of this card. Yeah, you'll have less Dawn than your opponent sometime, but you really want to be spending 4 Dawn just to draw 2 cards. Generally speaking, when this card would be relevant, you just want to be slamming big bodies. That's kind of the idea of the deck. We're going to ramp, we're going to slam big bodies. It's going to be hard for an opponent to kill us with being a 6,000 power leader. I just don't see the reason you would want to run Reiju personally. But I could, if you like it, I think 2 copies of this card could be okay. But it is a tight list, so finding room for it might be difficult. Next up, we've got King. I was running this card in my previous build for the deck, but right now I just don't think there's time to play it in the current format. Generally speaking, it's going to be more beneficial if you're just putting more power in your attacks than it is going to be to play out a 7,000 power body and remove a 4 cost. Most 4 cost characters are going to have to invest into attacking you anyways, so I just, maybe if our opponent goes too wide, it could be good, but I think this is going to be very dependent on how the meta develops, because I think there are just better options to play right now. John Bart, this one has also seen a lot of discussion with. It has, in some of the list you might find on One Piece top decks for Red Purple Luffy in the OP07 format. I believe they were running 2 copies of this card. It's another ramp option, kind of similar to Bon Clay, but this one's a 5,000 power body, and you do have to spend 1 Dawn in order to ramp the Dawn active. But it is a 5,000 power body naturally, which means it's a little harder for your opponent to remove, and it is just another way to ramp on 5. It's fine, but again, it's not searchable, and I just think there are better options right now. The list is too tight. I just don't think there's room for it. Maybe you can trim some of the top end and make room for a couple copies of this card, though. I might be being a little greedy by running 3, 12, 14 top end cards. Might be a little greedy, but so far it's been working well. And I really did want to keep this card in the deck, as I do think against decks like NL and Bonnie, this could be an exceptionally powerful card, allowing you to rip a couple cards from their hand. But ultimately, as I've been saying, deck space is just really tight, and I wasn't able to find room for this card. But like I said, you probably could trim some of your top end a little. Maybe if you're in your local area, they're not running a lot of red, purple law, so maybe you don't need the Robin as much. You could trim the Robins to put in a couple copies of law as well. But ultimately, I decided to cut it. But I do still think it's a really good card, and among all the cards on this list, this is the one I wish I could find room for. If I could play a 52 card deck, it would be 2 copies of Law. But that is going to be it for the deck and kind of some of the other options I think are worth playing. This is where I've landed with my list. Like I said, I've only played 7 games so far, but at the time of this recording, I have won all 7 of those games, so we do have a 100% win rate with the deck, and we've played against NL, Boa, Lucci. We've played against a lot of Luccis, and so far the deck has been doing very, very well. But I'm sure you're done listening to me ramble about the deck, and you want to see the gameplay, so let's go ahead and jump right in. Alright, up against another Rob Lucci, we will choose to go second. Got the Bond Clay to ramp us on turn 2. We've got an Anami. We're just gonna hope we're gonna draw into our big stuff, I guess. Maybe we can find a Luffy. They're just gonna be playing out the Tempest Kick. We do find the Luffy. And then we'll pass it back to our opponent. So now at least we have some form of top end. Did bottom my Robins there, so if they are going to try and wall up with Rebecca's, unfortunately I'm not going to have that as an out. Not sure why they'd swing 5 there instead of 6. They have the extra Dawn to do it, but I guess they wanted to play the Spandam to help fill their trash, so that makes a little more sense. We do now have the Jambe. We're just going to go ahead and swing 7 after playing the Bond Clay. We'll take that one. They did whiff off the Spandam. I was like, they should have more cards in hand, but they did whiff off the Spandam, which in my experience, he does a lot more than I feel like he should, but you know, it is what it is. I'm gonna go ahead and take this one. Get a Queen, that's a pretty good play for this next turn. We've got their Rob Lucci. Bye. Do this. Swing 6. Then play the Queen as well. They'll be going to 10 this next turn. Don't think we need the Zoro. Not on their Gecko turn just yet. Okay, so we are going to get to keep the Bond Clay from the looks of things. Do counter. Probably not getting any value out of Baccarat here. Don't have a 2K, so I'm going to take this one. Newgate's not bad. We could play Newgate. We could just swing 6 here with the Bond Clay. Try and go for a Luffy. Don't totally hate that. See what they do if we swing 6 at them. A counter. They're hurting for resources. I think I'm still gonna play the Luffy. We could attack into their board. I don't think we need to. Just try and get them to 1. Could play Bond Clay here to help ramp us up. But I don't think we need to. Just get them to 1. If they invest into getting rid of the Luffy, it's not. They're probably not getting big attacks off into us. We have an okay amount of counter. Thinking hard, they must have the counter to get out of this. If they do, I think we just attack into the Lucci at this point. They do ultimately decide to take. We're just going to try and get them to 1. Kind of forces them to either remove the Luffy or play a blocker out. Crashed 1 Sabo thus far. Give him the Bond Clay. Give him the Frankie. They did not use the reduction. They chose no targets. It looks like probably just playing out a couple blockers here. Play out the Brook. Then yeah, they play out the Sabo. We've got Kid we can play out. Do this. I think we just play out Kid. Go 7. Kind of what I figured. Block there. Looking a little sketchy as we're not really drawing our counter right now. Two geckos down though. But I don't even think they need the geckos. They've gone wide enough on board here. Could just poke at us for 7s. And I lose. Unless maybe that last card's a counter. Gonna be doing 8, 9. We take the 9, they've got 7 Dawn left. That's up to 12. I think I can live if they go all in. Alright, they're doing another 9. Get out of that. They go 8-8, we lose. Going 7. They couldn't go 8-8. They're just going for it. And we do have the counter out here, thanks to the radical beam. I think that's probably, yeah, they're just going to scoop it up there. They did not have a lot of counter. Playing the Soap Sheep, which is actually a card I've been considering playing around with myself. I think it could be pretty good into Red Purple Law, as this and an attack alone will bring 2 of their 4 cost within range of the Rob Lucci. Haven't played around with it yet though, but it is a searchable option that does help in the Red Purple Law matchup. Alright, we are up against another Rob Lucci. So far, all we've played against is Lucci and Boa. This is going to be game 6. So far, we are 5-0. This hand's okay. Maybe we find... pick the Luffy, I guess. Top end. I was kind of hoping to find a Zoro Joro that we could play out here on turn 2. But we can just swing with the Nami this turn. Then we've got Bond Clay. 5 and a 6. Gets the Helmeppo in the trash and probably takes the 6. But looks like maybe they're going to counter out. They did counter out pretty... We have played against this player before, and they did counter out pretty aggressively. So they do decide to take. I think that's correct. You don't want to go too low on hand. Give yourself some more options. 3 Dawn left. Let's counter out of this one. We've got 2 Bond Clays. Got the Brook. We can do Bond Clay. Do 7, leave 1 up. Next turn we will be on 9. Probably have reduction. Oh, they did trash the Helmeppo. But I bet Brook will get rid of Bond Clay here. And then I don't really have anything to play as of right now. They don't have their stage, which does make it harder for them to get rid of our Bond Clay with the Brook, but they are just going to play out the Suru. Hopefully they just split their attacks here. I can counter 1. They have to attack with Lucci first. Get the reduction on the Bond Clay. I think I might, if they just swing 6, I'm probably just gonna take it, and then I can counter out of the next one with the beam. It looks like they're gonna do 7, 7. I'll still take the first one. That doesn't do anything. So we do have the double Jambe now, so if they try and wall up with blockers. They're just playing out 2 Brooks. And we did get something nice to play out here. We can do that. Then leave 1 up for the beam. Lucci doesn't typically run a lot of 2Ks, so I doubt that they want to give me 2 of them here. I've been playing around with anywhere between 8 to 10 2Ks right now. Maybe 11 in my first build. But I think you can get away with less 2Ks in this format. They're not establishing any big bodies. The Brooks can give cost reduction, which might allow them to clear my Kid. But if they're not playing a blocker this turn, Luffy can get in there and do work. Even if they do, we've got double Jambe. We should be in a pretty good spot to close out the game here in the next turn or 2. They're surely going to counter out of the first 7. I imagine they'll get rid of the Kid here. Crash 2 copies of the stage. 1 Tempest. They might be hurting for cost reduction. I think we'll just give them the Frankie for this one. Five Dawn remain. Gonna be hard for them to get rid of this. Yeah, they're gonna attack with the Brooks just to reduce the cost. Okay. That brings it within range of Lucci. But they could also reduce it down one more. Yeah, but they're just gonna play the Lucci. They don't have a blocker. Out the kid. Do Luffy. Gain one, swing 7. We've got a lot of radical beams. If I swing 9, am I in peril of dying? Maybe. Let's do 8. I don't think I need to leave up all 3. This at least forces 2 2Ks. Or more than 2 cards. So yeah, they take. You're gonna go down to 0 here. I've got Jambes. I've got 2 beams up. I've got a 1K. Their bodies are small. I think we basically just win here. They're probably going to try and wall up with blockers. They get rid of the Luffy. Fine. I've still just got Jambe. It won't be the biggest swing ever if they get rid of the Luffy, but it's going to be hard for them, I think, to get rid of the Luffy and play a blocker, especially if... given that they don't have the stage here. What are they doing here? They're just gonna try and poke me to death with 6s and hope I don't have the counter. Play Rebecca. I don't think they're getting rid of Luffy. Don't see a world where that's happening unless you have like Ice Age, I guess. And even then, yeah, they're just playing Sabo. We're gonna play Jambe. I feel like this might be the exact thing that happened last time we played them. And we just slide right on in. Even if they got all the 2Ks in the world, they can't get out of this. They sure did got a lot of 2Ks. That was 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, they had a lot, but still not good enough. 19 to the face, unblockable. Usually gets the job done.